So every now and then, I just like to squeeze in a movie. And I said it before, will say it again. The channel is not about movies per se, it's about gaming, it's about music. But I just watch a lot of movies. I own a lot of movies. I've got almost every subscription out there for the streaming services out there. And I just like talking about them, thinking about them. And having a discussion about them, right? And the movie I want to talk today is about Greenland. It's directed by Rick Roman Wall. I always have a hard time pronouncing his name. And when I saw the trailer coming out, I was instantly very interested in the movie. The tone, theme, the way it was presented, and come on, Gerard Butler. What's not to like about Gerard Butler? He gave us 300, and Rick and Gerard know each other from Angel Has Fallen, two of the disaster White House movies that came out almost simultaneously, and Angel Has Fallen is the best of two. Also because of Gerard Butler, he just kicks ass, and beside him is Morena Baccarin, and I need to... Roger Dale Floyd is playing the young kid who is the son of Gerard and Morena, who's playing the kid. He's doing an excellent job. He's really likable. He's really convincing as a kid, and he's both great actors. And besides Gerard Butler, of course, later in the movie we see Scott Lamb passing by, who we know from Backdraft as the father, playing the father. So all in all, great cast, great director, and a great movie that came out on iTunes. It was of course intended to come out in the cinemas, and due to the pandemic it never reached cinemas. Maybe it will when it opens up, and I encourage everyone to see it. But I was just sitting on the couch, going through my phone, clicking on iTunes, on Apple TV, and I saw the movie came out. So we had nothing to do, I bought it, and we started watching. Now, in the days or in the weeks before we watched it, I did saw a lot of criticism about this movie. Jesus Christ, I'm gaming too much. About this movie, and on Rotten Tomatoes and IMDb, the overall issue people had with this movie was that it's a disaster movie, but it lacked graphics, it lacked CGI, it lacked the whole, well, what you see in 2012 or The Day After Tomorrow, for example. But if you have watched this movie and your biggest criticism is the absence of big CGI driven scenes, then I'm afraid you haven't understand this movie. This movie is not per se about the big CGI blockbuster disaster movie like 2012 or The Day After Tomorrow, for example. It is about how thin the layer is between civilization and people losing every form of civilization, and survival instinct kicks in. Is the movie without any flaws? No, absolutely not. There is a scene in there where they are being turned down, and there are groups of people being selected to survive the disaster. And when they show up, with every details being given them by the government to make sure they can get on the plane and flee for Greenland, where these governments have built bunkers secretly, they turn up and they're being turned down because their kid has a chronic diabetes disease, right, or condition. It's pretty weird that a government that is able to send out messages even directly to people's TV, to the selected only, to make sure that the message is brought out that they are selected. They know everything. They know their names, they know the street, they can reach the TVs, they know the cellular phones, they can send out text messages. They've made lists, they prepared bunkers in secret. Everything is very high tech, very driven, very data driven. And then they miss that their son has a chronic condition that makes them being turned down at the very last moment. That was a scene that made me, okay, I understand that they need to push it in a direction, but that was so tongue-in-cheek, so well, so easy that it wasn't really believable. But overall, when the movie starts, we see Gerard Butler in his role as a guy who builds building. He's an architect or some kind. He builds building and infrastructure, and you quickly find out that he's a very troubled marriage. Later on, you find out why he has a troubled marriage, and well, you can see that he's a broken man. He wants to make up with his wife. He wants to make up for what he's done. But we all know that he can't make up for what he's done. But he don't want to lose his family. And in the first few 5 to 10 minutes, you quickly find out that he and his family are selected. It's been broadcast to their TVs. It's been broadcast to his cellular phone. They are selected because, among other people, he has the skill to build big infrastructure, which will be needed to rebuild the world when the disaster strikes. Now, the disaster is a comet coming to Earth, and in the beginning, the authorities, the governments all over the world trying to downplay this as much as possible to not start widespread panic. Because eventually this comet will hit Earth and it will create a disaster similar to the disaster that hits the dinosaurs, right? So global extinction, and people need to go underground and live in bunkers for an X amount of time to survive. Now, the scenario is that they have selected doctors, they have selected scientists, they have selected people who can help build infrastructure to survive this disaster and rebuild the human race, or rebuild the world again to make sure the human race lives on. Now, when he is selected, you immediately being introduced to the survival instinct. His neighbors find out that he is selected and they're not. And in the beginning, there's a very touching scene where one of the neighbors is trying to give them their kid to survive, and he needs to turn them down. So what then starts is a 40 to 45 minute thrill ride that all of a sudden me and my wife were looking at each other and we were almost hyperventilating because of the constant drift. And eventually they are being separated. He wants to get the medicine for his kid. His wife finds out that they're being turned down because of the condition their kid is on. They're being separated, and then you constantly switch between the two who know where they are going. She is going with a kid to her dad's, and he needs to reach that as well. Now, along the way, you constantly find out that the layer between civilization, being nice, people being nice to each other, and people are on survival instinct modus and not being so nice to each other is very thin. As soon as there is a threat to your existence, people lose the ability of civilization entirely. So what then happens is a constant thrill ride of people trying to survive and reach their end destination, and that is the dad of his wife. Along the way, the mother is being separated. This is a very important scene in my view. Is a scene where they leave the drugstore. Kid needs insulin, of course, and she and her kid come into the parking lot when they want to leave the pharmacy, drugstore. People are looting, they're plundering. She gets the meds, and then a family, husband and a wife, on the parking lot decide to help them and say, where do you need to go? We need to go to X, and jump in the car, we will help you. So at first it starts out as people being nice and helping each other, but along the way the driver, the guy, finds out that they're selected, and he decides to kidnap the kid. She's going to be thrown out of the car, and then he takes the kid to try and get through the line because the kid has a bracelet which said that they are selected. Of course, the scene where she's being separated from her kid is very touching, very convincing. But as a dad, it's something you do not want to think about, that in such an environment, every environment, but that you're being separated from your kid and you don't know what's going on with your kid, right? So eventually they will come together, of course. I will not spoil a lot. And they meet up, all three of them, at their dad's. And that's where you find out what's happened in their marriage. And then the tone or the pace finally slows down a bit. It's not for long because eventually they have heard along the way that there are civil aircrafts going to Greenland, and now it's a matter of getting on that plane to going to Greenland. They're not the only one. They need to be there first to make sure that they get on that plane. Now, I will not. It's hard to spoil anything, right? But I can recommend this movie. For me, it's there are some flaws in this movie, but the overall meaning of this movie is not about CGI. It's not about those big blockbuster disaster movies. There is some CGI in there. It's decent. It's good. It serves a purpose. There's also some CGI in there that's not massively great, but that's not the overall purpose of this movie. The movie is a thrill ride about survival instinct, about the thin layer of civilization. So I can recommend this movie fully. If you haven't seen it yet, to me it's a B plus. There are some flaws in there preventing it from being an A movie, but the first 45 minutes really keeps you on the edge of your seat. It's a thrill ride. It keeps you grasping for breath, for fresh air, because it's just they're on enormous pressure that is so well translated to the screen that you actually can relate what's going on there. Then the movie slows down a bit, you get a bit more connected to the overall circumstances, and then it's just a rush to get to Greenland. Fully recommend the movie. Gerard Butler absolutely nails it. Scott Lang is of course a big ace. He has a very small part in the movie, but he's an ace. And Marina and Roger as the wife and the kid absolutely nail it in how this movie is presented. Rick Roman is a hell of a director, so it's a great movie. It's a shame it's not in the theaters due to the pandemic, but it's out on iTunes and I think on all major platforms where you can buy it, and I think it's even on HBO Plus or HBO Max as well. Fully recommended. Greenland, go watch it. I'll be back with you shortly, guys, with some gameplay of Season 3 of Call of Duty, of course, which we are having a blast with. Can't wait for Standoff to be unlocked, a fan favorite map. Be back with you shortly, guys. Back to the madness.